I always believed my life was a portrait of perfection. I had a loving wife, Emily, whose gentle smile and creative spirit lit up every corner of our home, and I was proud of the solid foundation our family had built together. Our days were filled with shared dreams and laughter, and my mother, Margaret, a pillar of strength and dignity, had instilled in me the values of loyalty and honor from a very young age. I trusted with every fiber of my being that nothing could shake the unbreakable bond we had forged over the years. For a long time, life was blissful routine. I worked as a project manager at a reputable firm, a job that kept me busy and fulfilled, and when I returned home, I was greeted by Emily's warm embrace and a house filled with quiet comfort. In our modest yet stylish living room, I could always count on the steady hum of family life. Even my mother, who lived with us, contributed to the harmonious atmosphere. She was known for her gentle wisdom and the soft, reassuring way she spoke, and I admired her for always putting family first. Yet, as the months passed, I began to notice small inconsistencies that disrupted the perfection I had come to expect. At first, it was barely perceptible, a slight pause in Emily's responses, a momentary distraction when I asked about her day. I brushed these off, attributing them to the stress of daily life. Perhaps the pressures of balancing work and home had taken their toll. But gradually, the signs became more frequent and insistent. I started noticing that whenever my mother and Emily were together, their glances lingered a bit too long and their conversations carried an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name. I recall one late afternoon vividly. I arrived home earlier than usual, expecting nothing more than the comfort of a quiet reunion. Instead, I found the house unusually silent. In the study, Emily sat by the window, her eyes fixed on something beyond the view, almost as if she were watching a secret unfold in another world. I stepped closer and noticed the small envelope clutched tightly in her hand. It was an unassuming detail, yet in that moment, it sent an unsettling chill through me. As the days wore on, I began to gather more evidence that made my heart heavy with dread. There was the distinct, unfamiliar perfume that clung to her clothes after her outings, and the hushed tones in which she and my mother would speak when they thought I wasn't around. At family dinners, when the house was filled with laughter and polite conversation, I caught fleeting moments where Emily's smile seemed forced and her eyes would dart toward my mother. I tried to convince myself that I was overanalyzing small gestures, that perhaps stress was playing tricks on my mind. After all, my mother had always been a loving and caring presence, and Emily was my cherished wife. The thought that either of them could betray me was unimaginable. But deep in the silence of the night, as I lay awake on our king-sized bed, my mind replayed every detail. Every stolen glance and every soft touch between them began to accumulate like pieces of a puzzle I had long ignored. I started to question whether I had been truly present in my own life, too absorbed by the routine and comfort to notice the cracks forming in our foundation. I wondered if the person I loved most could hide such a dark secret behind the mask of normality. The more I thought about it, the more the idea gnawed at me, a betrayal not from an outsider, but from those I had held dear all my life. In my desperation to find clarity, I began to take solitary walks along the riverbank. Under the vast sky and amid the gentle murmur of water against the shore, I tried to clear my troubled mind. But even nature offered no solace. Every ripple in the water reminded me of the unsettling undercurrents at home. I recalled a recent moment when, at a family gathering, I observed Emily laughing softly with my mother in the corner of the room. Their laughter, so warm and intimate in public, suddenly took on a sinister hue in my recollection. It was as if the very fabric of my cherished memories was beginning to unravel. I started to examine every interaction with a heightened awareness. The once innocuous exchanges between Emily and my mother now felt laden with meaning, a shared look here, a touch there. With each passing day, my heart grew heavier with the thought that something sacred had been violated. I wrestled with an agonizing inner conflict. On one hand, the deep love I had for Emily urged me to trust her, to believe that my mind was playing tricks on me. On the other hand, the mounting evidence left me in the grip of an ever-growing dread. That quiet evening, as rain began to patter softly on our windows, I realized that the seeds of betrayal had been planted long ago. I could no longer dismiss the disturbing signs as mere coincidence. In that moment, I resolved to confront the unsettling questions gnawing at my soul, even if it meant facing a truth that could shatter the life I had so carefully built. Little did I know, this realization would mark the beginning of a painful journey, a journey into the heart of betrayal that would force me to question everything I once held dear. As the warmth of summer faded into the crisp, clear days of autumn, my inner world grew increasingly turbulent. The sense of foreboding that had crept into my life could no longer be contained behind polite smiles and busy routines. Every day brought with it new hints, small signals that something was deeply amiss within the sanctum of my family. I found myself scrutinizing every gesture, every conversation, and every fleeting moment between Emily and my mother. The changes were subtle at first. At our morning breakfast, I noticed that Emily's eyes would often wander off as if she were lost in thought. The quiet clink of cutlery was accompanied by a silence that felt too heavy for the simple meal we shared. And then there were the moments during which my mother and Emily would converse in hushed tones in the corners of our home. Exchanges that, while outwardly innocent, seemed to carry a secret language known only to them. I began to feel that the warmth I had once known was being replaced by a cool, distancing frost. One particularly vivid memory haunts me still, a dinner party we hosted for close friends and relatives. The dining hall was resplendent with soft candlelight and the hum of convivial conversation. I watched Emily glide through the room, her smile as bright as ever, yet every so often her eyes would flicker toward my mother. My mother, with her ever-composed demeanor, would return that glance with a subtle, almost imperceptible smile, a smile that hinted at shared understanding, far removed from the casual affection of family. In that crowded room, among the laughter and light chatter, I felt an isolation that was both inexplicable and deeply personal. After the party, while the last of the guests departed and silence reclaimed our home, I wandered the empty corridors trying to piece together the fragments of what I had observed. I replayed every moment in my mind, searching for the truth hidden in a glance, a whispered word. Each recollection tightened the knot in my stomach. It was as though I had been living a lie, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents that now threatened to drown me. The final straw came on a stormy night. I returned from work to a home that seemed to hold its breath, a heavy, expectant silence that filled every room. In the dim light of the living room, I discovered Emily alone, tears glistening in her eyes as she clutched a small, neatly folded letter. The sight of that letter, and the secretive way she guarded it, sent a shock of dread through me. I couldn't bear to ask at that moment, so I simply retreated, my mind reeling with questions. Later that night, as I sat alone in my study, I gathered the courage to open the letter I had found tucked away in a drawer. The words written inside, delicate yet charged with emotion, painted a picture of clandestine meetings and forbidden intimacy, a narrative that confirmed my deepest fears. Every sentence cut deeper than the last, and the revelation that my beloved Emily and my trusted mother had forged an illicit connection left me numb. The paper trembled in my hands as I tried to make sense of the betrayal. How could those I loved most choose such a path? My heart ached with the realization that the sanctuary I had always known was now a house of secrets. I spent the following days in a haze of disbelief and sorrow. The once familiar rhythms of home had become dissonant notes in a symphony of lies. I found myself retreating into solitude, haunted by the memory of that letter and the whispered exchanges that now echoed in every corner of my mind. I began to document every detail in a journal, desperately hoping that writing down the pain would somehow exorcise the demons that had taken residence in my soul. Even as the full weight of betrayal sank in, I struggled with a complex mix of emotions. I still loved Emily, and that love made the discovery all the more unbearable. The memories of our early days together, the laughter shared on quiet afternoons, the gentle caresses and whispered dreams, now felt tainted by deceit. And my mother, who had always been my guiding star, had become the unexpected source of my deepest hurt. It was a paradox that left me shattered and questioning my own judgment. I knew that the time had come to face the truth, however painful it might be. I resolved that I would confront the two people who had shattered my world. The storm inside me was gathering strength, and I could no longer live in the shadow of suspicion and betrayal. I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation, even as the fear of what I might learn gnawed relentlessly at my heart. That night, as the rain drummed against the windows and the wind howled like the cries of lost souls, I sat alone with my thoughts. I knew that every step I took toward the truth would come at a price. Yet, deep down, I realized that only by facing the darkness head-on could I hope to reclaim the shattered fragments of my life. With a heavy heart and trembling resolve, I prepared for the day when everything would have to be laid bare, a day when the final truth would be revealed. no matter how devastating. The night of the confrontation arrived with an intensity that matched the fury of the storm outside. I had been dreading this moment for weeks, yet I knew there was no escape from the truth that had been festering in the depths of my soul. That evening, I returned home earlier than usual, driven by an overwhelming need to face the source of my pain. The air was thick with the scent of rain and the tension of impending doom. As I stepped through the front door, every creak of the wooden floor seemed to echo the beat of my anxious heart. I moved silently through the dimly lit corridors, each shadow stretching out like an accusation. And then I reached the living room, the place where, for years, I had found solace in the laughter and love of my family. Tonight, however, it was transformed into a stage for the ultimate betrayal. There they were, Emily and my mother, seated together on the sofa, their heads bent in quiet conversation. For a suspended moment, time seemed to slow to a crawl. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind struggling to process the scene before me. Every instinct screamed to turn and run, yet I felt compelled to witness this truth, no matter how devastating it might be. My voice emerged as a raw, ragged whisper that cut through the silence. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, the words heavy with the anguish and disbelief that had built up inside me. In that instant, the room fell deathly silent. Emily's eyes widened with shock and fear, while my mother's face contorted from calm composure to a pained resignation. Their expressions spoke volumes, of secrets shared, of forbidden moments, and of a betrayal so profound that it shattered everything I had once believed in. For what felt like an eternity, I stood there, my heart pounding in my ears as I waited for an answer. Finally, Emily's voice, trembling with regret, broke the silence. She began to explain in halting, tearful words, a desperate narrative of loneliness, of feeling trapped in a life that no longer held the passion of her youth, and of seeking comfort in a forbidden embrace. My mother, in her quiet, sorrowful tone, added her own account, a confession of a lifetime spent suppressing desires, of making sacrifices for the sake of appearances, and of succumbing to the overwhelming need to recapture something long lost. As the two of them spoke, I felt a crushing weight descend upon me. Every word they uttered tore at the fabric of my trust and left me questioning the very essence of my identity. I listened in a daze as the truth unfolded, each detail a dagger to my heart. The living room, once a sanctuary of family love, had become the arena for a betrayal so complete that it threatened to shatter me entirely. Unable to bear the overwhelming torrent of emotions, I finally demanded space. "I need time to think," I managed, my voice cracking under the strain. With those words, I turned and fled into the stormy night, my mind a chaotic mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. Outside, the relentless rain seemed to echo the tears I could no longer hold back, as I wandered aimlessly, each step a painful reminder of what I had just witnessed. That night, as I walked along rain-soaked streets beneath a sky lit only by occasional flashes of lightning, I made a solemn vow to myself. I would not let this betrayal define me. Even though my heart felt shattered beyond repair, I knew that I had to find a way to move forward, to reclaim my identity from the ruins of deceit. The confrontation had been a necessary, albeit excruciating, turning point, a moment when the truth, however painful, had been laid bare for all to see. In the days that followed, I struggled to come to terms with the enormity of what had happened. Every memory of happier times now carried a tinge of bitterness, and every whispered conversation between Emily and my mother replayed in my mind like a haunting refrain. I immersed myself in a desperate search for understanding, questioning every moment of my past and every decision that had led us to this point. It was a time of relentless introspection and raw, unfiltered pain, a period when the foundations of my existence were being dismantled piece by piece. I spent long hours in solitude, pouring my anguish onto paper in the form of journal entries that captured the tumultuous whirlwind of emotions inside me. I questioned the very nature of love and trust, wondering how it could be so easily shattered by the unexpected collision of human frailty and desire. The confrontation had forced me to confront not only the betrayal of those I loved, but also my own vulnerabilities, the blind spots that had allowed the seeds of deception to take root in our midst. Yet, even amid the darkness, there flickered a faint hope, a small, stubborn spark that whispered that perhaps, in time, healing was possible. I resolved that I would not let the betrayal define my future. Instead, I would strive to rebuild my life on a foundation forged in the fires of truth and sorrow. I vowed to seek redemption for the pain that had been inflicted upon me and, perhaps one day, find a way to forgive the unthinkable. In the weeks and months following that fateful confrontation, my life was irrevocably altered. The home that had once been a sanctuary of warmth and love became a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my trust. Unable to bear the memories that clung to every room, I made the difficult decision to leave and move into a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, a small refuge where I could begin the slow, painful process of healing. In that lonely space, I set about trying to reconstruct the pieces of my life that had been so brutally torn apart. I sought solace in therapy, joining support groups for those who had suffered similar betrayals, and spending countless hours writing in my journal. Each entry became a cathartic release, a way to externalize the raw emotions that had consumed me. Slowly, I began to understand that while the betrayal would forever be a scar on my soul, it did not have to define the entirety of my being. I spent long afternoons revisiting memories of happier times, of quiet moments with Emily before the shadow of deceit fell over us, of my mother's gentle guidance when I was a boy. With every recollection, I attempted to separate the love I had once felt from the pain that now tainted those memories. It was a delicate balancing act, an effort to hold on to the goodness of the past while accepting the harsh realities of the present. In time, a tentative meeting was arranged, a final, painful attempt to confront the past and seek some measure of closure. In a small, unassuming cafe on the edge of town, I sat face to face with Emily and my mother. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken sorrow and regret. Emily's eyes were red from tears, and my mother's features bore the marks of deep remorse. For hours, we spoke haltingly about the choices that had led us to that moment, about the loneliness that had driven our actions, and about the deep, irrevocable loss that had ensued. I made it clear that while forgiveness might be a distant possibility, the path to healing would be long and arduous. I expressed the pain that had left me feeling betrayed not only by my wife, but by the very foundation of my family, the bonds I had once thought unbreakable. Emily tearfully admitted that she had been consumed by a desperate loneliness, while my mother acknowledged that in her quest for a lost passion, she had committed an act that could never be undone. That meeting did not erase the past, nor did it magically mend the broken pieces of my heart. But it did mark the beginning of a new chapter, a slow, painful journey toward reclaiming my identity. I returned to my apartment with a heavy heart, determined to rebuild my life from the ashes of betrayal. I reconnected with old friends, revisited hobbies long abandoned, and gradually allowed myself to feel hope once more. Now, as I reflect on those turbulent times, I see a man who has been irrevocably changed by the events that unfolded, a man who learned that even the deepest wounds can, in time, yield a new understanding of love, trust, and redemption. The scars of betrayal remain, a permanent testament to a past that can never be forgotten. Yet they are also symbols of my resilience, reminders that despite the pain, I have found the strength to forge a new future. My journey toward healing is far from over. Each day brings with it the challenge of reconciling the past with the present, of accepting that the people we love are not perfect, and of learning that forgiveness is not a destination but a continual process. Even now, on days when the memories threaten to overwhelm me, I cling to the quiet determination that has carried me this far. This is my story, a story of love, betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately, the slow and painful road to redemption. Though the past will forever echo in the chambers of my heart, I have chosen to look forward, to build a future defined not by the actions of others, but by my own capacity for resilience and hope. Each step I take is a tribute to the strength of the human spirit, a spirit that, even in the face of the deepest betrayal, can rise again, piece by painful piece, to reclaim the promise of a new day.